My name's David Covington. I'm the CEO and president at RI International and one of the founders of the 5 Lanes Crisis Partners. And welcome to this 116th episode of the Crisis Jam. If you're here, you're one of the innovators who's creating a radical transformation of care in the United States for those who have an emergency that is behavioral health in nature. Instead of the punishment that gets so readily handed out of being in a cold, windowless hospital emergency department room for hours or days, or in the lonely and shameful backseat of a police car, instead bringing care and engagement. It's a radical transformation that we're all doing together. We're so glad that you're here to be a part of it. And today we have a special feature that I'm going to just tee up. We're going to have a Spanish introduction. Rosa, thank you.
Hola, buenos días. Bienvenidos a esta edición especial de Crisis Jam, en la que nos vamos a enfocar en mejorar servicios y apoyo para la comunidad latina e hispana. Nuestro invitado especial es Erick Senior Rogés, que nos hablará sobre servicios de respuesta que empatan y apoyan nuestra cultura. Bienvenidos y que tengan un excelente día.
Gracias, Rosa. Rosa's my girlfriend. She was telling you that she grew up in Mexico City, but has lived here in the United States for 30 years. And I'll drop, for those of you who don't speak Spanish, I'll drop what she said into the text area. And Pierre Luigi, you can let me know if I got it right from what I put in the chat text. Hearts beating in Spanish. We've again, Dr. Pierre Luigi Mancini was our featured presenter on that topic many moons ago, and will be part of our roundtable. And we're thrilled that Erick is here. Thank you, Tanja. Our community continues to grow. We've got about 3,300 of you who participated in these meetings, and typically on a given week, we'll have somewhere between 250 and 400 of you who are on the Zoom call. And another, again, 100 to 500 to 600 or more who watch on YouTube. And Karen, if we can put into the chat the playlist, if you sat down over the weekend, you can watch over 80 hours of Crisis Jam. We don't have all 116 episodes on, but we have about 80, a little more than 80 of those are available for you. And we do see that some of you sat down and watched through a number of those episodes, but our highest participation is still that special youth edition of the Sampson National Guidelines from back at the beginning of this year. If you'd like the Crisis Jam in your calendar, we're going to put the link in, but really the best way is to go to talk.crisisnow.com, which is, and you'll see the Learning Community tab, as well as Stephanie Hepburn's outstanding Crisis Talk articles. But the Learning Community homepage with the Zoom link for these meetings, the newsletter that gets you into all of this information, as well as the highlights from the prior week and all of those videos, the PowerPoint presentations, the trivia questions, et cetera, are all there. Our news of the week, USA Today did another outstanding article, not just about the 988 crisis line, but where it's going, where it is and where it's going. And there were a host of Crisis Jam regulars who were not just Tanja Miles, but Dr. Anitra Warrior, Tansy McNulty, Dr. Sosamulo Shoinka, all who have either been featured presenters or part of our roundtable and other segments in Crisis Jam. So we'll put that link in. A lot of great news. It was hard to pick this week, but the New York Times did an opinion guest essay. I answer the phone at a mental health hotline. Here's what I've learned. And one of the most constant threads of this article is the challenge of supporting an individual for many 20 minutes, 30 minutes on the phone, engaging collaborating together provides a kind of hope and softening of distress that works. But for those who need more, the navigating of the often fragmented system was challenging. And that really was a thread in the life of Diana Cortez Yanez. Many of us knew her not just from involvement in Crisis Jam. This picture on the screen is under the Obama administration, there was a mental health forum at the White House. We believe it was the very first lived experience peer supports event, and Diana is pictured. She was one of the presenters in that panel with other folks from Crisis Jam. Dr. Ursula Whiteside is sneaking into that picture with her. And Dr. Whiteside, Diana tragically died yesterday. We'd love for you to say a few words about Diana.
Yes, yeah, Diana Cortez Yanez. So she died after a medical emergency associated with longstanding diabetes. She was born in Mexico and recently lived near Mexico City. So she was 57. She was the best of our suicide prevention family. So her open heart and her generosity of spirit were entirely striking. And as she shared her own personal pain and also her practical wisdom to prevent suicide. So she was buoyant and loving, and her words went straight to the heart of our work. And in 2014, Diana entered the suicide prevention and lived experience field, and her first speaking engagement was with giants David Jobs and Barbara Stanley, and I dare say she stole the show. She was a founding participant and member of Now Matters Now in 2014, and Julie Goldstein of Zero Suicide invited her to be Zero Suicide faculty. She traveled around the country, sharing her lived experience with healthcare providers and systems in order to improve the care of suicidal patients. So she is, she was a beautiful, wonderful person, and we'll be sharing more about her life in many different ways. And we will have a Now Matters Now Diana Cortez Yanez Legacy Fund for lived experience educators, so that, to carry on her passion of people sharing their lived experience and coping using dialectical behavior therapy skills. So that will be coming in the future. So thank you, David.
Ursula, thank you so much. And Diana also talked about the unique challenges and opportunities of being a Latina woman. And we're going to get into that more. So thank you so much, Ursula. But setting up, Dr. Pierluigi Mancini, when he gave his presentation back some time ago, Pierluigi, you started with this quote from Nelson Mandela. Pierluigi, do you mind reading this for the folks today? Pierluigi?
Yes, it would be my pleasure. It's one of my favorite quotes. If you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. But if you talk to him in his own language, that goes to his heart.
So with that, let's go to Erick Senior Rogés. Erick, thank you so much for bringing your expertise to this topic. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David. And thank you, Dr. Mancini, for that great quote. I often actually usually in my presentations as well. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to be here and to speak on such important topic. We believe the outreach that this program is doing, the 988 number, is crucial in terms of care, and is also crucial in terms of care of our Hispanic and Latino populations. So that's in part what I wanted to speak about today in terms of culturally responsive mental health crisis services for Hispanic and Latinx populations. If we can go to the next slide, please. So I just want to say a bit about the center I work with. I work as a training and content specialist in mental health, meaning content such as this, but specifically related in terms of subject matter for workforce and communities who address prevention, treatment, recovery, support for Hispanic and Latino populations. And we do that through the promotion of cultural responsive practices, educational products, experiences, that's conferences, webinars such as this, and to expand the knowledge and skills among providers who are serving Hispanic and Latinx individuals. And our goal with this is really to help increase equity and access to care among Hispanic and Latinos in the US. And this is really important, really, where we stand in terms of how we see in terms of demographics, the having the availability of culturally responsive mental health professionals, considering that right now we stand at 19%, 1 of every 5 people in the US identify Hispanic and Latino, and that's projected to be up to 28% by 2060. So the importance of bicultural, bilingual providers is essential. Go to the next slide. So this is just a graph to put things into context. Mental health crises are not only suicides, but suicides are one part of mental health crisis. And so we look in that really in the past decade, how it's been looking in terms of suicidal thoughts, plans, and attempts. We've seen an increase, especially among Hispanic young adults, and then in terms of serious thoughts around suicide. We're also seeing an increase in terms of making a plan, and though attempts for Hispanic young adults have remained the same, there's also been an increase in terms of Hispanic adults from 26 to 49 years of age. Now, what we're going to speak about today is how maybe these thoughts being in a place of distress and despair is related to culture, right? And specifically to Hispanic and Latino culture, so we can have cultural responsive providers, services to meet the care and need of Hispanic and Latinos who may be in these situations of crisis. So one thing before, as I'll show, if anything from this presentation, I think this goes back in terms of when we speak in one's language that goes to the heart, it also means in terms of culture, right? Culture shapes the way we give meaning to our experiences of psychological distress, health, and healing. So it gives meaning in terms of our subjective experience of a crisis as well, right? And that can include whether our attitudes are about that crisis are real or imagined, whether our crisis or mental health crisis warrants sympathy, how much stigma surrounds that culture, that distress we're going through. We can go back to the next slide. Thank you. So that meaning that we attribute to our mental health and our psychological distress or despair is crucial, right? So as we go along today in the presentation, I'll be showing you in terms that point how it looks. But culture also shapes the way we seek help and participate in care. So it may shape if we are seeking help in terms of crisis, mental health crisis hotline, or a 988 number. Do we feel comfortable reaching out to a 988 number? And when we do, how do we speak about or explain and communicate our distress? This is part of taking a stance in terms of cultural responsive services, right? So cultural meanings have consequences in terms of help seeking, and they also have a consequence in terms of who do we seek first mental health care from. We know that Hispanic and Latinos may not seek as a first option mental health care providers. They might go to a traditional healing practice. They might go to their faith-based organizations. They might speak to their own family first before seeking help around not only mental health, but also mental health crisis. So that's how we, culture can also in this way prioritize our symptoms in terms of how we cope. Do we cope with this now? Do we cope with this later? How do we see that, right? And in terms of how we communicate, and one of the aspects to bridge the gaps in disparities of care is those communication gaps, which can exist between providers and clients and those seeking help. So understanding culture helps reduce these gaps in care. And I think we can go to the next slide, please. And so, a few points around, there are many cultural responsive dimensions to care and to mental health responses, but these are some of the few, right? Some which might be relevant to Hispanic and Latinos. So stigma or fear of being labeled as locos meaning crazy, or bringing shame or wanting attention to families, right? So there's this belief there may be this belief regarding mental health care as a sign of weakness. And we need to take in consideration this if we are in contact with somebody who is in a mental health crisis, or Hispanic and Latino, if they're perceiving even this attempt of seeking help as a sign of weakness. We need to also be aware that stigma is not only individually based or individual belief, is also surrounded by a cultural stigma might also lead to not self-disclose some information, being seen as a taboo. And when we think about Hispanic and Latinos, one aspect is the orientation towards the family, which is central, right? And so many things in terms of stigma might be related to not seek care because, as a saying in Spanish says, la ropa sucia se lava en la casa, which means dirty clothes is washed at home. We don't air our issues, particularly mental health issues or crises, to other people. So that's something we need to consider in terms of Hispanic and Latinos, which might be a health stigma, right? Now, in terms of, remember when we were talking about how cultures may shape the way we express or manifest or talk about our distress, or when we're in a mental health crisis, fatalism speaks to this, the concept that the individual cannot change their fate while trusting in a higher power. A common saying that a Hispanic Latino person might say is, what I'm going through, it's in God's hands, está en manos de Dios. It's in their hands. So this aspect of agency, of course, it's crucial when we think we're engaging with people who feel that they're in despair, that they're at loss, that they're at a point where it's hard for them to go through their experiences in their lives. So it's important to keep in mind this aspect, and of course this cross-cut intersects with aspects of religion and spirituality, which may be, as we'll see, a protective factor, but it can also shape into this form. So we need certainly to keep that in mind, and to understand how our distress is shaped and what we feel is in our control or out of control. And then in terms of engagement, right, confianza or trust, it's also a Hispanic and Latino cultural value that may be seen important in terms of not only developing rapport, but also if we're doing an assessment or we're tapping into a crisis, we need to build that trust. As David said at the beginning, this mental health crisis interventions may be 30, 40, 50 minutes long. So we're there with a person who is explaining one of the hardest issues they may be going through their lives. And one of the aspects, and this is really contrast to many ways mental health providers and behavioral health care providers sometimes have been trained in terms of more US norm-based practices, is the self-disclosure may not be right, and typically traditionally seen as something you would use in terms of working through mental health interventions. But small self-disclosures can be important for Hispanic and Latinos in terms of establishing trust. And that's something that we've seen. And I think it's very something important to keep in mind. Small disclosures, of course, going and rooted incongruent to the issues that are being brought by that client, the Hispanic and Latino client. And so this aspect of mutual reciprocity is essential. And so suicidality in Hispanic and Latinx populations, well, we of course have to look at common suicide risk factors, which are common to all populations. Those are both, for example, past suicide attempts, psychiatric conditions, and mental health conditions that may be present, as well as substance use. We know that there's an increased risk for suicidality in terms of people under using substances, but there's also a whole set of cultural related risks and protective factors. And I want to focus more on the remaining slides that we have and the remaining time we have on those cultural related risk and protected factors. If we can go to the next slide, right? So what are some of those factors that can lead to suicide attempts, for example, among Hispanics. Acculturation stress. And so what do we mean by acculturation stress? First, what do we mean by acculturation, right? Acculturation is the process by which a person adopts the values, the customs, and behavior of mainstream culture, in this case, maybe Hispanic and Latino, to the US cultural norms, while trying to maintain aspects of their own culture. So we can see how there may be stress of both navigating the US culture, navigating and adopting those norms, language barriers, experience of discrimination, migration grief, right? Feeling that there's this grief that there's a whole other world in my country of origin that I don't feel that I am living in while I'm in here. And of course, and this is crucial, the lack of instrumental and social support that can come from migration-related stressor. So we see there that experiences of discrimination, the family conflicts that come along with migration, also acculturation in terms of gaps, and we'll see that in terms of specifically parents and their children are associated with suicidal ideation and suicidal attempts. So when we are engaging with somebody who's Hispanic and Latino who's in a mental health crisis, some of these factors may be present in the forefront, right? Of course, socioeconomic disadvantages, which is not only related to Hispanic and Latino, but to many other groups. Now, traditional gender roles of socialization, why is that, right? So what we commonly use in culture as an aspect of machismo or male dominant oriented outlook on life can be a risk factor, of course. I mean, there's the risk that lack of employment, feeling less than other men, not being able to provide for their family as the chief breadwinner is it can be very distressing in certainly a person autonomy oriented culture as the US is. So this it can be a leading to suicide attempts among Hispanic identity and Latinos. And then as I mentioned, I think this is a phenomenon which is crucial to understand, especially where we see in terms of the groups who are committing more suicide attempts, who have historically committed more suicide attempts among Latinos, are Latina girls. And this has been happening through the past 3 decades. In terms of other teenage groups, Latina girls have the highest suicide attempts. And many of this has to do with navigating both their culture they're adopting, and those are the expectations from their family. And so the conflicts and the family dysfunction that can come from that, the interpersonal factors, are crucial to understand suicide attempts among Latina girls. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. So we discussed in the earlier slide what are the risk factors, but we also want to be sure we take a strength-based approach to understand how culture, the meaning of culture, what culture can provide for us, can be a protective factor against mental health crisis. And when we're thinking about interventions and engagement with Hispanic and Latinos, how we can formulate and understand their life adversities or issues they're bringing in terms of protection. So familism is a cultural value which represents a value of close family interaction and emotions, affection, loyalty, unity, clear lines of emotional attachments as part of what's protected for Hispanic and Latino cultures. And so I mentioned this central and cuts across many forms. As the definition, implies, we can see how this can be, of course, protective. I mean, one aspect is this orientation towards the family is not unique to Latinos, but it manifests in Latino in particular ways, right? So in terms of, we also need to understand that this can go both ways. Loyalty and obligation to the family can also put certainly Latinos at risk if they feel they're not meeting with the needs of health expectations. And then spirituality and religion has been found to be an important protective factor of well, It discourages suicide and one's personal beliefs about the value of living as a protective factor. It's important to keep in mind how this certainly can, for Hispanic and Latinos, can provide a sense of belonging, right? And versus isolation, especially when we think about strong racial and ethnic identity. So we have, the literature says, and we understand that those with a strong connection to their culture of origin have less suicide attempts, commit less suicide attempts. And this is important because the biculturality which it allows to navigate difficult situations. If we can go back to the previous slide for just 1 second. I also wanted to mention, right, in terms of a protective factor, that what we see in Hispanic and Latinos, what I was mentioning about the phenomenon of acculturation, is very important to understand in terms of how culture shapes how we feel, right? One thing that we know is that this in the literature called the immigrant or Hispanic paradox, which means that those who are foreign born or in a country, in their own country of origin, are actually at less risk than those who have spent more time in the US between Hispanic and Latinos. And why is that? Because there might be a whole host of associated loss of protective factors that comes with acculturation and spending and being socialized within US cultural norms. So that's important. And so here are some of the few resources that are tailored specifically more to interventions to prevent risky, not only risky behaviors as Familias Unidas, but also interventions for suicide risk for Hispanic and Latinos. Familias Unidas, Familias Adelante, Life is Precious, Con Mi Madre. And then there's, I would also always suggest for providers to take a look at the DSM cultural formulation interview. We have products on that, and I'll share a link very soon, but that's a person-centered assessment. It really gets to this aspect, right? And here is also, thank you for sharing the link, Kristen. Here is the link for one of our products from the Hispanic and Latino MHTTC, which is a guide on prevention and treatment. And you can either check out the link on the chat or use it as the QR code. So I would like to thank you all for giving me the chance today to speak, and hopefully we'll go through a roundtable conversation now.
Thank you so much, Eric. Dr. Pierluigi Mancini. So these concepts of supporting providers in better culturally and linguistically appropriate responses. You started a dedicated service for that, both prevention and mental health and substance use treatment back in 1999 in Georgia. Tell us a little bit about your reflections on Eric's presentation.
Well, thank you so much, David. And thank you, Eric. That was a fantastic job for 10 minutes of trying to tell everyone what we need as a Hispanic Latino community. So excellent job. So here's what this is all about, David. This is all about dignity. You know, this is all about helping individuals that have no access to services, who are suffering in silence. You know, we have issues like the linguistic access, right? You may be learning English, but you're not fluent in English. So you can't really communicate because you'll be having misinformation that can cause misdiagnosis, and it can cause a lot of problems. There is also, how do we enter this community? So I've met a lot of people, a lot of CEOs, a lot of programs that want to help the community, but they really don't know where to start. And so there's a couple of tips. You know, we need to make sure that, first of all, your own team internally, first as an individual and then as a team, that you do your cultural and linguistic responsive work. We need to make sure that we get rid of the implicit bias that may be within us and within our organization. Otherwise, we're going to be putting out messages that are not very clear, and it may isolate the community instead of helping them come and knock on our doors. The second one that I struggled with until we got creative is workforce development. Eric mentioned 988. Well, as you know, last summer when 988 was launched, they did not include Spanish text and chat. And we've been trying to launch that and it keeps getting delayed. But one of the reasons is we need the bilingual workforce. We need Spanish, English speakers that can answer the text and chat. So we need to develop this workforce. And there are a lot of people that can do that, people in recovery from addiction, from mental illness that we can certify as peers. But the certification of peers is not really jumping into this need and make sure that they develop this workforce. So we need to motivate. Is the fastest way to get information in the community, because what happens is once you enter the community in a culturally and linguistic responsive manner, the community will answer. They will come to see you, but you need to be ready to receive them, because the worst thing we can do is let people know that you can help, and then they show up and you don't have the right people to help them.
Dr. Mancini, thank you so much. And thank you, Eric. We've got a lot of information about the MHTTC and its resources. Dr. Mancini, I also encourage you to put your contact information and your website in here, because you're also working and leading in this space. So more to come, and we'll keep this conversation going as we proceed into 2023. So let's turn our attention to the Crisis Trivia Hot Seat today. And Amy Brinkley, are you with us?
I'm here.
Amy, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Now, Amy, we have this slide that we always do during the Crisis Trivia Hot Seat about the SAMHSA library and the free content that's available, magnets and posters and that kind of resource material. But we also have the T-shirts, the hats, and the long sleeve, et cetera, where you pick one of 4 SAMHSA logos and a quote on the back. And that's your quote, number 2, Amy. That came from one of, was it a lived lens or a presentation that you gave in Crisis Jam some months ago?
It was in a presentation, and I don't think it was even in my own, but it was just a comment that I had made. Yes, but yeah, that comment does look familiar.
So someone was channeling Amy with "It's a game changer when people care," and you can get a T-shirt with that on the back. Amy, you'll get one for participating today. Now, today, Amy, we've been having this Hispanic and Latino focus of our episode so far. We're going to broaden it even more to an entirely global view. We shared a link recently with many of you, but we'll put it in the chat text for some global summits. We did a second Crisis Now Summit in Washington, D.C. as part of IMHL with NASBID, EDC, and others back in 2019. And we're looking at doing another one as IMHL goes back to in-person next summer in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. So we'll put that link in. But that's the sort of the context for our question today. In the U.S., Amy, those in behavioral health crisis are often held in hospital ERs for days without active treatment, a practice called psychiatric boarding. Now, as we go to other countries, one of the things that first happens is, well, the U.S. is so different. Well, in fact, the U.S. is very different in terms of its healthcare system, but many of these practices that cause delays and detainment and feel like punishment actually occur throughout the world. In this particular country, that's the question here, they have a practice they call ramping, where the person doesn't even get into the emergency room. They're waiting out in the parking lot in the ambulance that transported them there until a bed is available in the ED, where they can wait for a bed somewhere else or a service somewhere else. And this can go on for 16, 20 hours, 24 hours in the ambulance before they get inside. In what country does this practice occur due to a lack of available beds in the ER or care areas open in the hospital ER? Has that been occurring in Australia, Chile, Mexico, or the United Kingdom? Now, everyone's putting that in the poll area right now. And Amy, we've had some confusion about the Crisis Trivia Hot Seat. You get all of the resources. You can talk this through. I'm going to share with you the results of the poll, and you can phone a friend as well. We've got some international folks on this call if you want to share the. But just talk this through for a moment. Do you happen to know the answer or have any thoughts on it?
So I don't know the answer. So I'm definitely feeling very vulnerable. But some thoughts I have, I'm thinking Australia, they have a pretty solid behavioral health system, I thought. And I've been in Mexico, and I know they have some areas of opportunity. So I'm kind of leaning towards that as a possibility. And I really have no idea about Chile and really the United Kingdom. So I'm definitely interested in what the poll says.
So the audience is all over the board here. They don't know the answer. Mexico and United Kingdom are both at 32%. They are neck and neck. So people are definitely swayed by the conversation today and the theme, but a lot think United Kingdom. Behind that is Australia at 20 and Chile at 13. So you want to phone a friend or you want to take a stab at this, Amy? Dr. Brian, Dr. Brian Sims was in the pre-show, so he actually can't be a resource, but there are many others here. Is there anyone you want to grab and get their thoughts on it?
You know, I've done some work with Dr. Goldman, and I just saw his comment in the chat. So I would love to call a friend and call on Dr. Goldman if that's
so.
possible.
Dr. Goldman, give your reflections. You're referencing that you thought you saw an article about this happening in the UK.
I think that's right. Don't hold me to it, Amy, and I'm sorry if I'm leading you astray.
Amy's going to get a t-shirt and either way. And this one is obviously one that has split everyone. So Amy, it sounds like the audience and Dr. Goldman would suggest United Kingdom. What's your final answer?
United Kingdom it is.
And it is in fact Australia. So
Wow.
now, you know, this is, Amy, I think really pushes to the heart of this when we hear about, certainly there are a host of mental health services in Australia, in the United Kingdom as well. Chile is announcing a crisis line. We'll have more information. That's where that one came from. In Mexico, obviously, we've talked a lot about today. But in Australia, in December of last year, the South Australia, you know, they have provinces. The South Australia government reported ramping took place on average 100 hours every day, that someone was just sitting in the ambulance waiting to get into the ED, where they could certainly wait further. Health Minister Chris Picton stated mental health is critical in fixing delays where people get stuck waiting for a mental health service. So we'll be talking more about this. And Amy, thanks so much for joining us. We'll be talking more about this as we move forward, but two issues here. One, we don't believe, again, back to the radical transformation we were talking about earlier, we don't believe we're going to change these types of issues with law enforcement and hospitals unless we have community-based mobile teams and crisis facilities that are directly accessible without going through a medical clearance in a hospital. And secondly, we have to come to grips with the scale. This is enormous. And we're going to be talking more about that in coming weeks. So again, Amy, thanks so much for joining us. Dr. Matthew Goldman leads a segment that is the Data Corner that comes up about once a month. We've since added Strong Talk with Vic Armstrong. We've added Medicaid Front and Center. And the final segment that we've been talking about was a Youth Corner. And so starting today, we're going to have our first Youth Corner, and it's a double feature with the Crisis Talk interview that Stephanie did with Vancouverite and 15-year-old Ingrid Parker. Stephanie, set this up a little bit, and then we're going to bring Ingrid in by virtue of technology.
Okay. First, I just wanted to say thank you for creating the Youth Corner, David. It's one thing for us to talk about youth mental health and another thing to include youth, so thank you. In this week's Crisis Talk article, I chat with 16-year-old Ingrid Parker and her mom about their experience navigating the crisis system in Vancouver. And she shares, Ingrid in particular, shares about how she was not included in discussions about her care. The video gives a quick window into what we discussed.
Great. So let's watch the video. And again, Steph, share with the group why we're doing a video.
Oh, well, that's a great question. So Ingrid is in school right now, and that has really been a barrier for including youth voice. So this is a great, thank you, David. This is a great opportunity to bring in youth voice. Thank you.
And Stephanie thanked me. Who we should thank is certainly the SAMHSA leadership who brought the Youth National Guidelines, of which there's been such an interest. And Haley Winterberg, remember she was featured speaker who challenged us to bring youth to the table. So with that, let's bring youth to the table. And Steph, if I can figure out how to play it, there we go.
I'd like to welcome Ingrid Parker and her mother, Monique Helbig. Ingrid, can you share your experience navigating the crisis system in Vancouver?
So with my case, I had to be transferred from doctor to doctor for years and just bouncing from different practitioners who wouldn't communicate with each other. So I felt like there was we could have made a lot of further steps that just weren't taken. And I think that was also really difficult for me because I wanted to find a solution and I wanted to find a way to get help, and I didn't really have access to that.
Monique, can you share your experience as Ingrid's mother navigating the crisis system?
Yeah, so one of the difficult things for us, I think, was that Ingrid became sick during COVID. So that was probably a factor in our issues as well. But a big problem was just the wait in between doctor's appointments and the length of time that it took to get her a diagnosis. And we were struggling with her illness for over a year before we actually got a diagnosis, and just a lot of gaps in time and overlaps, and maybe some duplication in testing as well before we were able to get an answer for her. And that was difficult. And also, once we were finally diagnosed, one of the big things was not having Ingrid in the room when we had discussions about her health. And that became pretty quickly and obviously a block to her getting better. And even, it got to the point where she was just so emotionally overwrought every time we had an appointment, because it was just a really traumatizing experience each time.
Ingrid, can you speak to that? Because I know in the article, you spoke to me about how you need to be a part of your own recovery, and your mom's sharing her perception of what it was like for you to be excluded from that conversation. What was your experience in being excluded?
Yeah, I agree with what she was saying. I think that the longer that I was out of the room, the harder it was for me to feel like I was playing a part in my own recovery, which I found I think is really important. Because, at the end of the day, I'm going to be the one who continues on this journey, not anybody else, not the doctors, and so when I wasn't even included in what the steps we were going to take, what was happening to me right now, I just had to watch people separate me from my entire situation and what my health journey was. That was really hard. And I think that should I have been included, I probably would have made steps at a greater rate. I don't know if it's specific to my illness or if they generally just, as a kid, want only focus on the parents. But I don't think that being excluded from your own medical information, especially when you're going through a mental illness, is helpful.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and to Ingrid and Monique for joining us. And we'll do more on this youth topic as we bring more voices to the table. So terrific. And speaking of voices at the table and nothing about us without us, Amy Detmer, Mary Ellen has been an amazing participant and featured speaker who was very much loved in the Crisis Jam. We're glad to have you today in our Lived Lens section. Amy, are you with us? There you are.
I'm with us. Thank you, David. Thanks for having me today. Very excited to be here and to be speaking on this Crisis Jam. As David said, my name's Amy, and I am a person with my own mental health lived experience. And I am a person that has had lifelong anxiety from the age of 9, as early as I can remember. And what that's meant for me is different kinds of anxiety attacks and panic attacks that have showed up in very different ways over the last 25 years. I'm 34 now. And for me, crisis doesn't always just happen in the behavioral health setting. In more recent years, it's landed me in emergency departments for some of the physical symptoms and things that kind of show up as a result of anxiety. And what that experience has been like for me in the few times that this has happened, once having chest pain and shakiness and going into an emergency department and seeking some support around that. And what I have found there was a significant amount of stigma and almost even a lack of kind of even addressing what was going on with me beyond kind of these physical things that were showing up. And in addition to that, the other time that I most recently had experienced an emergency facility was actually I was taking my young children who both had RSV this past fall into the emergency department. And I went in having a panic attack, having a hard time kind of breathing through this very scary, I don't know what's happening with my children's situation. And again, I was met with this stigma. I was met with kind of almost a way of just kind of ignoring even what was going on with me in that department. And it felt very disconnecting and very unsupportive in a lot of ways. And I think that for me, like, it's so important that the providers in integrated settings, in the regular physical healthcare settings, are geared up to support people going through these reactions to normal life events, or at least that's what it's been like for me, kind of living with anxiety my entire life. And I think that, when I think about kind of this question of care that I deserve, care that we deserve in crisis, in the crisis continuum, it's about taking the time to talk to us. This idea of finding out, what happened rather than what's wrong. The idea that, like, also kind of going with the flow, that there's things that I may not want to address. And I think we were hearing some of that earlier in kind of this cultural responsiveness, but going with the flow of what do I want to address? What am I seeking support of, and being here and letting me make those decisions to guide my own path along the way. Give me options, give me choices, and not just options and choices that exist within this particular medical facility that I'm in, but what else exists in the community, and how do we make sure that community-based services are being offered as much as possible too, including things like peer respites. And I think that starts with the crisis teams, these emergency response teams, really being made aware of what exists in the community, and to be able to provide that to me, to us, in a way that is trauma-informed and self-directed. So that's what I have to say. Thank you again for having me today. And it is a real pleasure to be a part of this Crisis Jam and speaking on the lived lens portion of it.
Amy, thank you so much for joining us and for talking about those experiences and those interfaces between that healthcare system and the dedicated emergency behavioral health system that we're envisioning moving forward. And if you're watching the chat, Wendy White-Tigreen talking about the, again, going back to Ingrid's discussion, but this is something Amy's experienced, something Diana talked about in her life, and that Ingrid experienced as well, of this being talked past, not being engaged, not being given skills directly, and how that happens so readily on the healthcare side. Wendy, you want to just say a quick word about, you were talking about, is it your daughter and how they trained her in self-management for asthma?
Hi, everyone. I mean, it just seems like a fairly basic fundamental skill that we need to be thinking about. How do you manage recovery? And when young people are transitioning to adulthood, we can't just magically expect that they're going to have all the skills to do that health self-management. And so it resonated for me, as a parent of young adults now, that they need to be building all these skills in terms of general health care, not just mental health care and substance use conditions. So yeah, Thanks.
Thanks, Wendy. And thank you, Amy, for joining us. And please give Mary Ellen our best love if she's not with us today. With that, let's go to Dr. Richard McKeon, who's going to lead us with an update from SAMHSA.
Thank you so much, David. And again, just an outstanding crisis jam. So much to be learned, much appreciated. So I'm going to give an update regarding two different presidential executive orders where there is currently very significant work for people to be aware of that's going on. The first one is the Presidential Executive Order on Military and Veteran Suicide Prevention. The second is the Executive Order on Policing. So regarding the Presidential Executive Order on Military and Veterans Suicide Prevention, while there are numerous components of that, including on lethal means safety and other critical issues, and some aspects of it are very specific to veterans, there are other parts of the executive order that really have implications for the country as a whole. One of those is, and some of you may have heard me talk about this before, but the Departments of Health and Human Services, the Veterans Administration, the Department of Defense, and others have been tasked with developing what's called a feasibility analysis and implementation plan for embedding evidence-based suicide prevention, that is, screening and risk assessment, safety planning, and rapid follow-up in emergency rooms all across the country. So not only VA emergency rooms and not only for veterans, but for all Americans, whatever emergency room they may go to. A really important area, obviously a challenging one. We're also called upon as part of that executive order to speak to the use of evidence-based suicide prevention in urgent care centers and in emergency transport, emergency medical services. So these are all components, as well as to speak to access to 988 and crisis services in tribal communities. These are all parts of the presidential executive order. People want to know more, feel free to contact me. We'd be glad to share with you. The second presidential executive order is on policing. This is, again, a multi-component executive order. I'm not qualified to even to characterize the many different components of it. But of course, like any executive order, it is a public document. So I'll mention the two that with which SAMHSA has been most engaged, and I'll ask my colleague Tiffany Russell from the 988 office to assist me. So one area of work that SAMHSA has been engaged in, section 4, is on officer wellness and officer suicide prevention. The work of the International Association of Chiefs of Police in coordination with the Action Alliance for the National Consortium on Preventing Law Enforcement Suicide has been an integral part of this work. Recommendations are being readied to go through a clearance process. Some of you may be aware that Congress mandated enhanced surveillance for around officer suicide just a year or two ago. The other area of the executive order on policing is specific to crisis services, so particularly important for the people on this crisis jam. So Tiffany, can you give an update on that one?
Sure. Thanks so much, Richard. Hi, everyone. I'm Tiffany Russell, Chief of Crisis and Justice Initiatives with SAMHSA's 988 team. And in this particular section of the executive order, we were tasked and directed, the Department of Justice, as well as the Department of Health and Human Services, was directed to provide, in consultation with other stakeholders, to provide best practices and recommendations on the involvement of law enforcement dealing with individuals that are experiencing a behavioral health or mental health crisis, and also individuals that have disabilities. And so in this particular report, as I mentioned earlier, we had several focus groups and with different stakeholders in the advocacy field, civil rights, human rights, mental health advocates, to come together and walk with us as we put together this report that lists out not only the best practices, promising practices as it relates to calls to respond to these individuals, but also the different types of models that are in place to respond to these types of situations. So different types of responder models, as well as community-centered crisis services and centers. This particular report is also approaching the point of being placed in the clearance process. Just to let you know, we have also been directed to have all of the deliverables of this particular executive order to be completed by May 24th of this year, which will be the 1-year anniversary of this executive order being issued. And so we're currently trying to get through this clearance process so that this report can be made public. We're really excited for the recommendations that not only pertain to the best practices, but also how to fund these practices using federal dollars, and in addition to an explanation of the federal laws that apply to these certain types of situations as well. So we're really looking forward to this report being released before the deadline of May 24th.
Terrific. Thank you both, Richard and Tiffany. And let's go to Dr. Joan Gillies with NASBIT for the update from the States.
Great. Thank you, David. Really quickly, after we were listening to the grantees from the TTI SAMHSA funded programs last year for 988 and for crisis services, one of the things that we realized is that we could do would be to develop products that people could use in real time, that they could use right away in both advocacy, training, teaching. So several of the products that we did in videos as well as manuals, but the first one we did was Healing from Inside Out. And we wanted to use the voice of people who had received services as well as the people on the ground providing services. So Healing from Inside Out are the stories of incarcerated individuals in New York Department of Corrections that really talking about what a difference it made and what a difference it would have made if community programs that address trauma had been available to them, that perhaps they wouldn't have been incarcerated in the first place. We're putting up a link to all of our videos and all of our products, and please feel free to use them and distribute them however it makes sense to you. The next one is Healing People, and this is about peer support, police involvement in crisis services. We were talking to folks who were living on the streets, police that were involved in transporting them, as well as peer support. And I think it's a really great training video that really looks at what collaboration between police, peers, and providers can really be. Another one is Who I Am, and that is a video that we did in the Rainbow Heights program in Baltimore City, serving folks in the LGBTQ plus community. And again, the voices of people that are receiving or have received services on what would make a difference in crisis services. Another one is Making Relatives. We did this with folks with the Indigenous people, and really looking at what would peer support look like in tribal communities. And it was pretty powerful developing this and learning about the whole concept of healing soul wounds and how implementing trauma-informed approaches are really about healing soul wounds and how different peer support can look in tribal communities. So that's another video. And then there's one that we were also funded by Sozoze to develop, and it's on compassion, where we brought together police, providers, community members, survivors, people with lived experience to really talk about the role compassion plays in all of our work. So they're all documents and videos for you. We realized that people that we wanted to see this, they can always look at something on their phone. Oftentimes they're not reading papers or going to conferences, but people can look at their phone who are working in communities. We have many more coming for this next fiscal year, including workbook for kids that the police can hand out if they see kids in a household where they're responding, or peers can use them. It can be in ER. So we're developing really self-regulation workbooks for little ones. We're developing a lot of work in faith-based organizations, thinking that if we can move the support for crisis and 988 services into community providers rather than just clinical services, we could really make a difference. So we're developing trauma-focused groups, trauma-focused support groups in multiple religious organizations. We have a Jewish version that we work with rabbis on, an Islamic version, a Christian version, a Native American version. I'm happy to say we have translated into Spanish versions, and these will all be, we do trainings on this twice a month to be able to bring people together if they want to start these groups within their own places of worship. So that's just a few things that we're doing. I know I'm talking very fast, but we're putting up our website, and please take a look at these and feel free to use them and distribute them as makes sense to you. So thank you.
Thank you, Joan. And we have put those links into the chat. There's not a lot on the legislative update today. We'll get to that in the actually week after next as the president's budget comes through. And we do have a fair amount of updates on the states, which will Caitlin and Stephanie will make sure to get you in next time. The schedule coming up, I would like to highlight two upcoming presentations. Kim Sanders from Ukaru on March 29th, I think is going to be something that all of you who are directly engaged in any kind of facility care are going to be really interested in. And the presentation from Raheem on April 5th is going to be electrifying, very much the president's order around policing and discussions of mobile crisis. And with that, thank you so much for joining, and we hope to see you next Wednesday. Bye-bye.